The glass didn't crack. It shattered, 3 pieces of crystal exploding across the marble floor while 50 of Seoul's most powerful people held their breath, and the man whose million-won suit now wore a river of red wine didn't scream, didn't punish, didn't even flinch. He just looked up at her, this woman no one in that room had ever noticed before, and something in his eyes said he'd been waiting his entire life for someone to destroy him like this. But what none of them knew yet was what was already hunting him from the other side of that room. The glass shattered. Not cracked. Not chipped. Shattered, 3 pieces of crystal exploding across the marble floor of the most exclusive gala in Seoul, dark red wine spreading like a wound across the white tiles. Every single person in that room stopped breathing. Amara didn't. She was already moving, already bending down, already reaching for the broken pieces with hands that weren't shaking, not yet, when the first guard stepped forward. Then another. Then a third, all of them appearing from nowhere like shadows given body and purpose, all of them staring at her with expressions that said one thing very clearly: you made a mistake tonight. She looked up, and the man whose suit now wore a river of Chateau Margaux across the chest was looking back at her. He wasn't angry. That was the thing that frightened her most. He raised one hand, slow, deliberate, and the guards froze mid-step, like someone had hit pause on the entire room. His eyes didn't leave hers. Dark, calm, utterly unreadable. And somewhere beneath the silence, beneath the held breath of 50 wealthy strangers and the hum of a string quartet that had stopped playing, something shifted between them. Something neither of them understood yet. If you haven't already, hit subscribe. This story is just getting started. 12 hours earlier, Amara was arguing with her reflection. Not out loud. She wasn't that far gone. But the woman staring back at her from the cracked bathroom mirror in her tiny apartment, the one with the water stain on the ceiling and the heating that worked only when it felt like cooperating, that woman looked tired. And Amara had spent too many mornings looking tired to let one more slide. She pulled her hair back, twisted it into a shape that was half intentional and half surrender, and turned to the kitchen table where 3 fashion sketches were spread out like evidence of a life she hadn't built yet. The sketches were good. She knew they were good. Not perfect, nothing was perfect yet, but good enough that when she'd shown them to Professor Kim last semester, he'd paused for a full 4 seconds before saying, "This is interesting, Amara." 4 seconds of silence from a man who had never once paused to consider a student's work in his entire career. She'd carried those 4 seconds with her like a talisman ever since. Mina appeared in the doorway without knocking, because Mina had never knocked in her life and saw no reason to start now. "You're not ready," Mina said. "I have 2 hours. "You're not ready," Mina repeated, dropping onto the couch with a bag of convenience store kimbap. She tore one open and pointed at Amara with it. "You have that face." "What face?" "The face you make when you're about to talk yourself out of something." Amara opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it. Mina knew her too well for that. They'd grown up together, Mina, Korean through and through, all sharp wit and zero patience, and Amara, half Korean, half Nigerian, all of the confusion that came with being both and somehow neither. "It's just a gala," Amara said. "I'm serving drinks." "You're serving drinks at the Lumiere Foundation event." "That's not just a gala. That's the gala. Every designer in Seoul will be there." "Which is exactly why I shouldn't embarrass myself." Mina chewed slowly, watching her. Then she said, "You're not going to embarrass yourself. You're going to walk in there, you're going to do your job, and you're going to remember that every single person in that room was once exactly where you are." Amara looked at the sketches on the table. The woman in the dress she'd drawn, tall, powerful, wearing something that looked like armor made of silk, stared back at her with an expression that said move. She moved. The venue was called the Meridian, and it was the kind of place that made Amara's chest tighten just walking through the service entrance. Marble floors polished to a mirror finish. Chandeliers that probably cost more than her entire building. The air itself felt curated, like someone had filtered it for wealth and let it settle. She clipped on her name tag, picked up her tray, and joined the other servers in the pre-event briefing. 22 of them, all young, all dressed in black, all pretending they didn't notice how much money was about to walk through those doors. The head server, a woman named Grace with the posture of someone who'd been doing this for years, gave them the usual warnings. Don't linger. Don't make eye contact longer than necessary. If a guest dismisses you, walk away immediately. And under no circumstance, she emphasized this 3 times, were they to engage in conversation with the VIP guests at Table 1. Who's at Table 1? Someone asked. Grace's expression didn't change. Jinwoo Park. The name landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Amara didn't recognize it, not immediately, but she felt the ripple. Every Korean server in that room shifted, just slightly. A tightening of shoulders. A quick glance exchanged. Who is he? Amara whispered to the girl beside her. The girl, couldn't have been older than 19, just shook her head. Stay away from Table 1, she said. That's all you need to know. The gala filled quickly. Within 30 minutes, the Meridian was alive with the kind of noise that only money makes, not loud, exactly, but full. Laughter that came too easily. Conversations that circled back to names and numbers. The string quartet played something classical and unremarkable in the corner, and the champagne flowed like the guests were being paid to drink it. Amara moved through the crowd with her tray, careful, steady. She'd done this before, catering events, gallery openings, a corporate dinner that had lasted 4 hours, and tipped her 40,000 won. She knew how to disappear in a room like this. How to become the hand that delivered the glass without ever becoming a person. But tonight, she couldn't stop looking. Not at the guests. At the room itself. The way the light hit the silk dresses. The way color moved against skin. The way a woman in emerald green crossed the floor and turned every eye toward her without seeming to notice, and Amara's mind was already sketching, already breaking the dress into its components, already imagining what she would do differently if she'd designed it. This was why she was here. Not just for the money. For the education that no classroom could give her. She refilled her tray and pushed deeper into the crowd. Table 1 was in the back corner of the room, separated from the rest of the gala by a subtle arrangement of white orchids and the quiet presence of 2 men in dark suits who stood like furniture that could end you. Amara didn't look directly at the table. She'd been warned. But as she passed, close enough to set a glass on a nearby surface, she caught a glimpse. Jinwoo Park sat alone. Not surrounded by people. Not holding court. Alone, at a table designed for 6, with a glass of red wine he hadn't touched and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. He was younger than she'd expected. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Sharp jaw. Dark hair, slightly too long, like he'd stopped caring about it. Dressed in a suit that fit him so perfectly it looked like it had been sewn onto his body, but worn like a cage. His eyes moved across the room with the kind of attention that wasn't casual, it was surveillance. Amara looked away before he could catch her staring. She didn't look again. Not until the accident. It happened fast. She was crossing back toward the bar, tray balanced, 3 glasses of red wine catching the chandelier light like small fires. A man stepped backward without looking, some guest in a conversation that mattered more to him than the space around him, and his shoulder caught the edge of her tray. The physics were simple. The tray tilted. Gravity did the rest. 1 glass survived. 2 didn't. The third, the one closest to the edge, flew in a perfect, terrible arc and landed directly on Jinwoo Park's chest. The room didn't gasp. It stopped. Like someone had pressed pause on reality itself. The string quartet held their bows mid-stroke. Conversations died mid-sentence. 50 people turned toward Table 1 at exactly the same moment, and the silence that followed was so complete that Amara could hear the wine dripping from the white tablecloth onto the marble floor. Jinwoo looked down at the spreading red stain on his shirt. Then he looked up. At her. And Amara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Not because of fear, though fear was there, cold and immediate, curling in her stomach like smoke. Not because of the guards, who were already moving, already closing the distance between their principal and the woman who had just ruined what was probably 100 million won suit. but because of the way Jinwoo Park was looking at her. Like she was the most interesting thing that had happened to him in years. "I'm so sorry," she said. The words came out steady, steadier than she felt. "I'm so sorry, He held up his hand. The guard stopped. The room kept holding its breath. "What's your name?" he asked. She almost lied. Almost said something safe, something forgettable, something that would let her disappear back into the crowd and pretend this night had never happened. But the way he was looking at her, not with anger, not with contempt, but with something that looked almost like relief, made her tell the truth. "Amara." He nodded, like that was exactly the answer he'd been expecting. "Amara," he repeated. "Sit down." She should have said no. Every instinct she had, every warning Grace had given, every whispered conversation she'd overheard in the service corridor, was screaming at her to apologize again, to bow, to walk away, to forget this entire interaction ever happened. She sat down. The guards retreated to their posts. The room slowly exhaled, conversations resuming in hushed, urgent tones. But at table 1, it was just the two of them, and the silence between them felt different from the silence around them. Theirs was charged. Curious. Like two people standing at the edge of something and neither one willing to look away. "You're not afraid," Jinwoo said. It wasn't a question. "I'm terrified," Amara admitted. "But I've learned that showing it doesn't help." Something flickered in his expression, something close to a smile, though it never quite arrived. He lifted his wine glass, the one he hadn't touched all evening, and took a slow sip, ignoring the stain on his shirt entirely. "Most people who spill something on me are begging for their jobs within 3 seconds, he said. "I don't work for you." "No," he agreed. "You don't." He studied her for a moment, and Amara had the uncomfortable sensation of being read, not just looked at, but understood. Like he could see the sketches on her kitchen table, the cracks in her bathroom mirror, the 4 seconds of silence from Professor Kim. "What do you actually do?" he asked. "When you're not pouring wine on strangers." She hesitated. "Then, I design clothes." His eyebrows lifted, just slightly, but enough. "Show me." "I don't have anything with me." "Then tell me about what you're working on." And she did. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the way he asked, like he actually wanted to hear the answer. Maybe it was the fact that no one in that room, not a single person in 500 square meters of wealth and influence, had ever thought to ask her that question. She told him about the dress, the one on her kitchen table, the woman in silk armor, and she watched his face as she described it, watched the way his eyes stayed fixed on hers, not with politeness, but with genuine attention. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You should be doing that," he said. "Not this. It's not that simple." It rarely is. He reached into his jacket, the ruined one, and produced a black card. No name on it. Just a number. He slid it across the table toward her. "If you ever need anything," he said, "call that number." She looked at the card. Then at him. "Why would you do that?" He didn't answer. He just held her gaze, and in that silence, Amara felt something she couldn't name, something warm and dangerous and entirely too real for a conversation that had lasted less than 10 minutes. She took the card. She smiled. And for the first time all evening, Jinwoo Park smiled back. If this story has you hooked, drop a comment right now. Tell me, do you think Jinwoo is everything he seems? Because we're about to find out. Mina called at 11. Amara was still at the venue, cleaning up, her hands still slightly unsteady from everything that had happened. She stepped outside into the cool night air and answered on the second ring. "How did it go?" Mina asked. Amara opened her mouth and then stopped. Because how do you explain to your best friend that you spilled wine on one of the most dangerous men in Seoul, sat down at his table uninvited, told him about your dreams, and walked away with a card that could change your life? "Fine," she said. "It went fine." Mina didn't believe her. Amina could hear it in the silence on the other end. But Mina, for once, didn't push. The whispers started before Amara even made it back inside. She was passing the main hall when she heard two women talking near the powder room, voices low, careful, the way people talk when they're sharing something they know is dangerous. Park hasn't been seen publicly in months. The fact that he's here tonight means something is happening. They say he controls half the underground operations in Gangnam. His father disappeared 3 years ago. No one knows if he's dead or if Jinwoo. Amara stopped walking. Her heart, which had been beating with something close to hope, shifted to something colder. Heavier. She pulled out the black card and stared at it under the fluorescent light of the corridor. No name. Just a number. The kind of card that belonged to someone who didn't want to be found. What have I done? She found him outside. Not looking for him, she told herself that, even as her feet carried her through the side exit and into the private courtyard where the event's VIP guests could smoke without being photographed. He was standing alone by a stone railing, jacket off now, the ruined shirt open at the collar, looking out at the Seoul skyline like it owed him something. "Who are you?" she asked. No greeting. No preamble. He turned. Didn't look surprised. "You already know who I am," he said. "I know what people are saying you are. And I need to hear it from you." Jinwoo was quiet for a long time. The city hummed below them, traffic, distant music, the ordinary noise of a million people living their ordinary lives. None of them knew what was happening on this rooftop. None of them would have cared. "I'm not just a businessman," he said finally. The words came out flat. Practiced. Like he'd said them before, in rooms darker than this one, to people less forgiving than Amara. "Then what are you?" He looked at her, really looked, the way he had at the table, like she was the only real thing in a world made of glass. "I'm someone who has spent a very long time being exactly what other people needed me to be," he said. "And tonight, for the first time in longer than I can remember, someone looked at me like I was something else." The anger in Amara's chest didn't disappear. But it cracked, just slightly, letting something else through. Something she didn't want to examine too closely. "You tricked me," she said. "I didn't tell you anything that wasn't true. You left out everything that mattered." He didn't argue. He just nodded, once, and the honesty of it, the quiet, undefended admission, hit her harder than any lie could have. They stood in silence. The city breathed below them. And Amara, for the first time that night, didn't know what to do next. The chaos started at 11:47 p.m. Amara heard it before she saw it, a sharp crack from inside the venue, followed by shouting, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Jinwoo heard it too. His entire body changed in an instant, shoulders back, jaw set, every trace of the vulnerable man from the rooftop gone, replaced by something harder, colder, more dangerous. "Stay behind me," he said. "What's happening?" "Stay behind me." He moved fast, faster than someone in dress shoes had any right to, back through the side entrance and into the main hall. Amara followed, heart hammering, and what she saw made her stop dead in the doorway. 3 men she didn't recognize were pushing through the crowd near the bar. Not guests. They moved wrong, too purposeful, too aggressive, cutting through the panicked guests like sharks through water. One of them had something in his hand that Amara couldn't see clearly, but the way the crowd was parting around him told her everything she needed to know. Jinwoo's guards were already moving to intercept, but the crowd was between them, a wall of screaming, stumbling bodies that slowed everything down. Jinwoo grabbed Amara's arm. Not roughly, firmly. Like he was holding something he couldn't afford to lose. "We're leaving," he said. "But now." They ran. Not through the front, that was blocked, chaos spilling out into the street. Jinwoo led her through a service corridor she hadn't known existed, down a flight of stairs, through a door that opened onto a private parking level. A black car was already there, engine running, driver already behind the wheel like he'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Jinwoo opened the back door and Amara climbed in, her hands shaking now, adrenaline flooding her system in waves she couldn't control. He slid in beside her and the door closed and the car pulled out of the garage and into the Seoul night in one smooth, practiced motion. Behind them, somewhere back in the meridian, sirens began to wail. The car drove for 20 minutes before Jinwoo spoke. They were on a highway now, the city a blur of light on either side, and the silence in the back seat had become its own kind of conversation. Amara's heartbeat was still too fast. Her hands were still shaking. She pressed them against her thighs and stared at the city rushing past and tried to understand how a single evening had become this. "Are you hurt?" Jinwoo asked. "No. Are you scared?" She almost lied again. But lying to him, she was learning, felt wrong in a way she couldn't explain. "Yes," she said. "But not of you." He turned to look at her. In the passing light of street lamps, his face was all shadows and sharp lines, and for a moment he looked less like a man and more like something from one of her sketches, a character she was still trying to understand. "I want to change," he said. The words came out quiet, rough, like they'd been sitting in his chest for years, and he was only now letting them out. "I have wanted to change for a long time. I just didn't have a reason that was strong enough." Amara looked at him, at the stain on his shirt that had started this entire night, at his hands resting on his knees, open and still. "And now?" she asked. He held her gaze. "Now I do." The car moved through the night. The city glittered around them. And in the space between them, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel something that had been building all evening finally, quietly arrived. Amara leaned toward him. Just slightly. Just enough. Jinwoo leaned toward her. The distance between them shrank to nothing. And then stopped. Neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. The moment hung there, suspended, like the wine glass mid-fall at the beginning of the night, full of possibility, full of gravity, waiting to see which way it would break. Jinwoo pulled back first. Barely an inch. But enough. "Not yet," he whispered. Amara nodded. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Not yet," she agreed. Weeks passed. Seoul moved on, the way cities do, the gala forgotten, the incident reduced to a paragraph in a gossip column that no one read twice. Amara threw herself back into her work. The sketches multiplied. The woman in silk armor became 10 women, then 20, each one a variation on the same theme, strength disguised as beauty, power that didn't announce itself. She didn't call the number on the black card. She didn't need to. On a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks and 4 days after the night at the Meridian, Amara opened the door to her small studio space, the one she'd finally been able to afford after months of saving, and found a single white orchid on the doorstep. No note. No card. No name. But she knew. She picked up the orchid, held it to her chest, and smiled in a way she hadn't smiled in years. He showed up on a Thursday. No suit this time. No guards. No black card, no silk, no armor. Just Jinwoo jeans, a simple white shirt, his hair still too long, his hands in his pockets, standing outside her studio like he was waiting for permission to exist in her world. Amara opened the door. They looked at each other. "You left," she said. "I did." "Everything." He nodded. "Everything." The Seoul afternoon stretched around them, golden, warm, unremarkable. A city of 10 million people, none of whom were watching. None of whom knew that 2 people were standing in a doorway, deciding whether to step forward or stay still. Amara stepped forward. Jinwoo reached for her hand. And they walked, not toward anything in particular, not away from anything either, just forward, together, into the kind of ordinary afternoon that neither of them had ever been allowed to have before. If you made it this far, you already know what to do. Subscribe, like, and drop a comment below. Would you have walked away from Jinwoo that night? Because I genuinely don't think any of us could have. Until next time.